Welcome to the Vine, and thank you for being with us this evening on what feels like a very solemn moment in the life of our nation and the life of our church. Throughout the week, Jason, Destiny, and I have been in conversation about how we might best respond communally and liturgically to this moment. And for me, a particular work kept surfacing in my heart. I had the privilege of studying with Dr. Preston Williams at Harvard, doing a seminar on King's thought and literature, and we read almost everything that he wrote. But one of the sermons that he delivered just feels as fresh and relevant today for us now as it did when he delivered it in 1963. The occasion was the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. It killed 4 young girls, and it shook the core of the nation. It shook the nation. It resulted really in the passing of the civil rights legislation of 1964. It was a major turning point in the civil rights movement. And this is what he said to that church on that day. He said, "These children, unoffending, innocent, beautiful, were victims of vicious and heinous crimes. They are the martyrs of a holy crusade for freedom and human dignity. So they have something to say to us in their death. They have something to say to every minister of the gospel who has remained silent behind the safe security of stained glass windows. They have something to say to every politician who has fed his constituents the stale bread of hatred and the spoiled meat of racism. They have something to say to federal government that has compromised with undemocratic practices. They say to each of us, black and white alike, that we must substitute courage for caution. They say to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, and the philosophy which produced the murders." Now, I don't know about you, but that feels as relevant, as urgent now as we remember different names, as we lift up George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, as it did in 1963. So we're going to be doing some exciting things this evening. We have been generously gifted by my dear friend and mentor, the Reverend Paul Roberts Abernathy, who is going to be sharing some original poetry he composed in response to the events of the last week, and who's going to be sharing some of his wisdom from a lifetime of experience around questions of race and inclusion in the context of our own church, of the Episcopal Church, and of the United States. We're also going to be listening in just a moment to a piece of music that was composed by Common Hymnal, and it's called Innocent Lives. They created it in the aftermath of the George Floyd murders. It's a very special piece of music, and we were so grateful that they're giving us permission to use it in the context of this service. I know that we're in for a very special time together, and I would like us to pause and pray as we move into that time. Holy God, you are a consuming fire. Burn away every part of our life that does not lead to deeper communion with you and with each other. Burn away the fear and the hatred, the resentment and the ignorance that infects our hearts and infects this land. Burn away, O God, the sin of racism, whose deep roots continue to burrow into the soils of our national and ecclesial life. We ask, Holy Spirit, that you descend upon us now, that you reconstitute us in the image of God, that you give us grace to see in the victims of these most recent heinous crimes beautiful children of God who deserved to live, who deserved to flourish, who deserved our love and our respect and our care. May we have grace to see each other as one single human family, all of us, your children. We lift us up in Jesus' most holy and precious name. Amen.
I woke up black today. Subtitle, Redivivus. I woke up black today. It's something I must remember. I've had to remember for safety's sake. For daily my life is at stake. For I've never been treated like other people, like you, being given the benefit of the doubt. Rather, when I walk down the street going from here to there, or dare I exercise my right to run, or drive, or enter a bank or store, always it seems it is assumed by you that I am there for more, to rob you, to steal from you, to destroy you, to take from you what doesn't belong to me. But my remembrance that I am black doesn't spare me, doesn't save me from dying by you. I'm chased for being out of place by noble ones performing a citizen's arrest, though failing that lawful test, rather wresting my life from me with a shotgun blast. I woke up black today and spent the day as an EMT saving lives, then at night to rest upon mine own bed, only to be shot and killed by officers of the law, errantly showing up in the wrong place. And though it was my place, I was there at the wrong time. I woke up black today, and this time I was charged with resisting arrest. The officer, his boot remaining on my neck, even after I stopped moving, long after I, begging I can't breathe, stopped breathing. I continue to wake up black, my skin like a pelt, a hunter's insignia, a reason to chase, to choke, or to shoot, to kill, and all because you say I threaten you. My dark skin, unlike the clarity of your white translucency, makes me automatically untrustworthy. But why should I trust you? Hence, I am no one who no one, surely you, need understand, much less know. For so and still it hath been, that I to you am better dead, the less said by you to justify your unjustifiable, the better the best, for then you can rest in peace, but not in life or death, me.
Just to think of my little boys with dark hair and dark skin, how to tell them that they're not safe in the streets. Where do I begin to say justice is blind? He's a short-sighted lie. If color don't matter, why is color first to die? I'm calling for change to the injustice, stand and fight. I'm calling for change, begging that we will set this right, that we won't lose more innocent lives. Just to think of all that's lost when violence steals a life. Oh, humanity, why do we become sign. If we say nothing at all, we are endorsing a crime. It's time that we stand up and regard the human life. Oh, I'm calling for change. To the injustice, stand and fight. I'm calling for change, begging that we would set this right, that we won't lose more innocent lives. Oh, innocent lives, innocent lives. I'm calling for change. Through all injustice, stand and fight. I'm calling for change. Oh, I'm calling for change. Begging we'll make things right, that we won't lose more innocent lives. Oh, innocent lives. We'll protect those innocent lives.
A reading from the book of Acts. When the day of Pentecost had come, the disciples were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? How is it that we hear, each of us in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. In our own languages we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them, "Men of Judea and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken of through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and I shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Come down, O love divine, seek thou this soul of mine, and visit it with thine own ardor glowing. O Comforter, draw near, within my heart appear, and kindle it, thy holy flame bestowing. Oh, let it freely burn, till earthly passions turn to dust and ashes in its heat consuming. And let thy glorious light shine ever on my sight, and close me round the while my path illumines. Let holy charity mine outward vesture be, and lowliness become mine inner clothing. True lowliness of heart, which take the humbler part, and o'er its own shortcomings weeps with loathing. And so the yearning strong, with which the soul will long, shall far outpass the power of human telling. For none can guess its grace till he becomes the place wherein the Holy Spirit makes his dwelling.
Greetings, everybody, again, and thank you, Paul, so much for the gift of your words and for your poetry. It is so meaningful to hear you express them in person. As I was reading them, I can picture you delivering this powerful poem, but I wanted to see it, and the way you embody it, it brings so much texture and richness to that experience, so thank you. You have had such a rich and wide journey, Paul, in your life and through the church. I got to meet you as a mentee when you were my advisor doing field study for Virginia Theological Seminary. At that time, Paul was the rector of St. Mark's on Capitol Hill, just a stone's throw from the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And I would just love to hear from you, Paul. What parts of your journey are resonating for you right now? What parts do you think are instructive for us in this moment?
Thank you, Jude. First, I want to say it is a joy, a great joy in my life to be reconnected with you. The second thing I want to say in relation to that is I've always admired you and I've always loved you. And you're one of those people that my mama used to say, whenever she saw someone through whom God's light shone, she would say, that's a special one. And you've always been a special one for me. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be like you when I grow up, if ever I decide to do that. So,
Pretty sure it's the opposite, but I am so grateful. Thank you.
but in terms of my my ordained journey, I'm now retired. But in terms of that journey, I served almost 40 years in places as varied as the middle of my home state, Missouri, to the south side of Chicago, to Charleston, South Carolina, and then for the bulk of that time in Washington, D.C., in two places, and the last 17 years of which on Capitol Hill. As I reflect on my experience, the element of race was always there. The Episcopal Church is and remains a largely white church. And I can remember being asked when I entered seminary, why would I want to enter seminary to be ordained in a church that was white? And I remember saying to the psychiatrist, because we had to have a psychological exam before entering, and also we had to have one on exiting to make sure we hadn't lost our minds while we were in seminary. But I remember saying, I was born and raised in the United States of America. What more training and tutelage do you think I would need to be in the church? Because the same experience transcends and envelops the whole of the American cultural experience and still does. All of this informs how it is for me now. I suppose, no, I don't suppose, I know, one of the saddest elements of all of it is it seems that it doesn't change. And the recent deaths of Black folk with which we have been praying about and crying about and protesting about and marching about and chanting about, that's why I woke up Black today. The subtitle is Redivivus. It repeats. It doesn't matter who wakes up Black. The threat of death is always the same, wherever that person is in this land. So my church experience speaks to it because the church is just as vehemently racist in many respects as is the United States of America and all of its governmental, societal, cultural, systemic, institutional forms.
That is such a powerful word, and I think a necessary one for our church. As you know, a lot of the work that I've been involved with in the Vine is trying to lean into a spirit of decolonialization, trying to hold that mirror up to ourselves and ask that question, how can we do and be better? You've always modeled that for me, and so you are one of my great heroes, and I am so grateful you're taking this time to share with us. You wrote this incredible suite of poems this week in the wake of these events that everyone's been experiencing and watching, and I experienced it almost like a triptych, and you're so powerful, you're so good with your words. It's like you're painting. It's like a visual experience. You take us through, and I'm curious, what is your creative process behind that, and what is the emotional and theological arc that you went through that you want to communicate through your words to us?
When Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and when we finally heard about it, and then Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd, there were days that I would sit at my desk and nothing would come. And I'm one of those people who has to keep throwing words at things until something sticks and I can make sense of it. And perhaps the truth is I was stymied because it didn't make any sense. And after a moment of prayer and of weeping, the words, I woke up Black today, poured out of my soul. By the way, I digress. Oftentimes in Scripture, when either the Hebrew or the Greek is translated heart, it really isn't heart. The Greek word is splagnon, which really precisely translated is bowels. It poured out of the depth of the bowels of my soul. Sometimes sermons write themselves, sometimes poems write themselves. And this is one of those cases where it wrote itself, it was there, it flowed. And in a way, my fingers couldn't type fast enough to catch up with what was being poured out. That it had to come out. It was a cathartic experience. And I sat with that poem for another 2 or 3 days, and then realized I was still banging around, bashing into the poles of sadness and anger. One moment I'd be weeping, the next moment I'd be raging, the next moment I'd be weeping, the next moment I'd be raging. And so there is a middle piece. I woke up sad and angry today. And originally, sad and angry and hope were one poem. But I couldn't get to hope that fast. It was there to be gotten to, yes, but not at that moment. And then finally, yes, hope arrived, and in the most incredible way. Have you ever had an experience, Jude? And I know you have. Have you ever had an experience where you had forgotten something, it came back to you again, and you realized, aha, I knew that before. I needed something to help me remember. And what I remembered was that hope appears precisely in the place where despair resides. Because if it's not in that place, then it's hope that's wishful thinking. It's my articulation of my desires in the face of things that I can't control, which are manifold. But hope, which can look through the darkness to behold the light that is yet to be, that always walks hand in hand with despair. And that is what gives hope its power. Because despite the darkness, it still can see. And that's where that poem came from. And that's what I believe God is about. You know, God who stays with us, who is with us, who walks before us, who walks beside us, who resides underneath us. No matter what's going on, that is the message of that God.
I'm literally getting chills as you talk, and I'm taken back to those Sundays and watching you preach and just being riveted by your words. This is awesome. I love that image of a God who walks beside us, and the reality of hope and despair walking next to each other. I think immediately of the Emmaus story in the Gospel of Luke, these despairing disciples and Jesus, this living hope, coming up alongside them and walking with them. And that is the image that we take into the story that constitutes the raison d'etre for today's feast day, for our transferred feast day here at the Vine of Pentecost, where they're all gathered together, waiting on hope in a certain sense. Where do you see this Pentecost experience speaking into this moment, speaking into your poetry, speaking into everything that's happening? How do you read that right now, Paul?
The immediate word that comes to mind, Jude, is the disciples were waiting in Jerusalem. They were waiting for the fulfillment of Jesus' promise that power would come, and that power would come for them to continue his ministry. So first of all, in that waiting, that was an immense act of trust. That was an immense act of hope, being able to behold that which was yet to be, and to trust that it would come. You see, hope, again, is not wishful thinking. It's a conviction, it's an assurance that what was said will come to pass. And so Jesus said power would come, wait here for it. They gathered and waited, and it came. And they were empowered. They were empowered to preach the good news, to proclaim it in word and deed. And I love that Acts text, chapter 2, where Peter first had to say, we're not drunk. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Although I do digress once again to say the Greek that is translated inebriation and the Greek that is translated inspiration come from the same root. So I can understand why folk thought they were drunk.
Oh, there you go.
But Peter had to say, no, they're not drunk. They are inspired. They are inspirited. They're inspirited to do what they are doing, and that is to share the good news of Jesus. And that's what I see as a positive, powerful, passionate, poignant word for today. Yes, things are dark. Yes, the shadows of evil enshroud. All of that is true. Yet we have been given power, the power to love and the power to be just. And by love, I don't mean affection, although affection is a wonderful feeling. And I'm a feeling person. I got lots of feelings. I got
You
feelings
do.
all the time. But when I say love in this instance, I'm talking about the spiritual power, the capacity, the ability to be benevolent, to do the good for another, even one who is unlike one. And then to be just, to be fair for all, at all times, and in all ways. We, by the Spirit of God, have that power. Now, the question is, power, just like anything else, can be employed and it can be not employed. We have the power. Question is, do we choose to use it? That's what I say Pentecost is saying.
That's a powerful word. I mean, I think that's something that strikes deeply for me right now. With everything that you've said so far, it's like we're at this moment of decision, and we're faced with all of these choices as a people, as a nation, as a church, of what direction we're going to turn in. And there really is a choice, isn't it?
Yes.
It's in our hands. So thank you for bringing that to us. I was really struck by that line. You said, "My skin like a pelt, a hunter's insignia." That one line in that first poem, "I woke up black today," and I thought, it's such a visceral image. I think for those of us who aren't people of color, it's such a visceral image for us to hear, to receive, to read, mark, inwardly digest what that experience is like. And I think for a lot of us, there is a subjective wall, to your point, like about making decisions, about choosing to move in certain directions. And I think about Pentecost, and I think about the ethne, the groups falling away, as it were, and their individual identities being affirmed because they're hearing in their own tongues, but this unity that sort of spreads around because they're all receiving the same good news, the same gospel of empowerment, and how that is causes such great hope and celebration, and on the other hand, casts such a long shadow over the whole of our history since, all the ways in which we have just reverted back into this brokenness, this fragmentation. And one of the things that has been emerging for me on social media is reports of especially Black men sharing with folks rules that their parents give them for when they leave the house, to try to protect them, to try to make sure that they don't fall victim to the things that we've seen. And I'm curious, did you grow up with those rules, Paul? And what were they like? And how has that changed? And can you just speak into that for us?
The two primary rules my brother Wayne and I received from our maternal grandmother, who was the matriarch, Audia May Horde Roberts. She would say two things to us every day. One, when you leave this house, remember who you represent and behave accordingly. Two, always remember that you are Black. No matter how fair-skinned you may think you are, you remember you're Black because your life depends upon your remembering that. She would tell us that every day.
Wow. That's incredible. What was that like for you? What was that experience like of moving out into the world and hearing those words?
When we got older, we understood. When we first heard it, we were frightened. What did she mean? And she wouldn't explicate any further. And we got older, we could look back and say, aha, that's what that was about. Excuse me, that's what that is about.
Indeed.
Because the language of that admonition and the meaning of that counsel remain true, palpably true.
Mhm. Thinking about that for today, thinking of George, of Ahmaud and Breonna, where do you find hope in this landscape that looks so much like it has not changed? I mean, we open with reading from Eulogy for the martyred children, and where do you experience despair still? I love that you're honest, that you say that you exist in these polarities, and you can't just jump right to hope. So where are you finding both of those things right now?
Right now, I find massive hope in the protests that are taking place all over our land and around the globe. People standing up, incarnate, infleshed, embodied voices crying out for justice and in the name of love. The violence is a distraction, I believe, but the fact of the matter is people are standing up and standing out. People of all colors, people of all ages. That gives me hope that something may change. Institutions by virtue of their inherent ontology, their beingness, don't change without being pushed. And so I pray that these protests will have that effect on all institutions, religious, societal, governmental, economic, that change will happen. And it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be sudden, but the steady drumbeat, the steady push may bring change, will bring change. That's my hope. That's my hope. And where is my despair? Where is my sadness? Where is my sorrow? That it takes this. It takes more killing, it takes more dying to get to this. I hope we don't need any more to be reawakened. Yet, as I'm wont to say of the many things I'm wont to say, unless and until things change, George Floyd is but the latest on a continuing list. God, I pray that won't be so.
If you could leave us with one word for this community, for the Vine and the wider audience that we're speaking to, and for our church, for the Episcopal Church, what would that be, Paul?
You know, for 15 years, my life's mantra has been, when I know that for which or those for whom, in the name of love and justice, I will dare to die, then and only then will I know how to dare to live. And by that I mean, unless I know what I'm willing to lay down my life for and for whom, because I follow Jesus, who said, follow me. And Jesus didn't say, follow me at a distance. Jesus didn't say, follow me with an umbrella. Jesus said, follow me with a cross, because I'm going to my death. And that's what I'm calling you to do. Or as Bonhoeffer would say, when Jesus bids one to follow, Jesus bids one to come and die. And so when I know that for which I'm willing to lay down this life, then I'm free to live. I'm not encumbered by fear or safety or demands for security, because life is not secure. I'm willing to live it fully, freely, faithfully. So that's the word I'd want to leave. Find that for which you are willing to lay down your life, and then you'll know how to live it.
Thank you so much. And I'm reminded of your book, For the Living of These Days, and just the treasure of wisdom that I have found in that beautiful volume, which is a collection of, I believe, your sermons and reflections over the years. And I want to encourage people to look to that. We'll have a link to that a little bit later in the service as well. Thank you so much, Paul, for taking this time, again, for sharing the beauty and power of your words with us. Just such a powerful testimony, and heartfelt gratitude for you. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. And I know Pantheola, my bride, who, as I always say, is the best reason to know me. She would want me to say, I love you, Jude Aaron.
Well, and I love you, Paul Abernathy. And Pantheola, give her my love. Give her a big hug.
We'll do it.
Okay.
I will do it. Thank you
so much.
Thank you. My joy. Thank you.
Thank you again for being with us and for being part of this conversation. You are part of this conversation in a real way. I want to invite you to add your comments, your thoughts in the chat bar below or to the side. This is a living conversation, and we are all part of it. That is our ethos at the Vine. It's an ethos that was inspired to a large extent by my time at St. Mark's on Capitol Hill, where following each sermon, there would be a period of feedback where the congregation would speak to the preacher, and there would be a dialogue about how they experienced that work. I want to encourage you also to check out Paul's book. It's called For the Living of These Days. And if you were moved by his words just now, then you will be deeply, deeply moved by his work in this book. Let's just take a moment to be with each other, to share our thoughts together.
apart. Someone's in despair this day. Have you prayed from your heart? So many are trying to find their way. They need your light, you know, for our prayers of love lift them high. They heal them, sustain them, and set them free. Our prayers of love lift them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them the way to go. They need your light, you know, for our prayers of love lift them high. They heal them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayers of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Oh, you are the place you need to start. So open your mind and use your heart. Don't waste time and don't delay. So many are in need of a prayer today. Somebody's in need of a prayer today. And one's in despair. Someone's in despair this day. Did you pray with all your heart? Just listen to what Spirit is telling you. Newton to the holy call for our prayers of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayers of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayer of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayers of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayer of love sets them free. Our prayer, oh, it heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayer of love, it heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayer of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free. Our prayer of love lifts them high. It heals them, sustains them, and sets them free.
I woke up hopeful today. Subtitle: What we do does matter. I have come to believe, to know, that it is here where resides my despair, that hope unrelenting seeking, finding, making home in the tiniest corner abides. Hope, the eyes through which, beyond the present darkness, I am able to behold the light of what is not yet. For as the apostle saith, so I agree, who hopes for what we see? And if we hope for what we do not see, then we wait, and I add, work for it with patience. What is this work? For me, it is to allow the Spirit entrance to teach